So, our afternoon session will open with a presentation by Alan Karass. Alan is Director of Libraries and New England Conservatory. In his spare time, he is an ethnomusicologist who investigates the relationship between politics, identity, and music festivals in Tunisia. His chapter, Identity, Music, and Festivity in Southern Tunisia, will appear in the forthcoming Handbook of Musical Identities by Oxford University Press. His talk this afternoon is Seeing Hasta, Siempre, Comandante in Tunisia, Images of Che Guevara after the Arab Spring. Alan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have to start with a little disclaimer that I will be reading my paper and I absolutely hate reading papers. But I do know that if I don't read, I will just go out of control and nothing will make sense. So I apologize that after I tell a little story, I will read a paper. But there are lots of musical examples. So to break the monotony, you'll actually have some tunes to listen to. So I do have a little story to tell you before I start to read. A lot of people ask, Alan, why Tunisia? How did you get started in Tunisia? What happened is about 12 years ago, I saw a conference announcement. There's a company in Australia, and all they do is they do conferences called the Future of the Humanities. It sort of rotates around the world, and I found it to be a really terrible conference. However, they announced this going on at the University of Tunis, and I saw the pictures and I said, I'm going to go. The pictures look beautiful. So I went to my boss, Jim Hogan at the time in Holy Cross, and I said, Jim, I really want to go to the conference in Tunisia. And I'm sure he thought, this is just a fad, and Alan will forget about this. So he said, Alan, if you write a proposal, if it gets accepted, I will find the money to send you. So I scurried away, I wrote a proposal, it got accepted. I went back to him and I said, hey Jim, I have my acceptance letter, will you find money? So very begrudgingly he went, and he came up with the $4,000 to send me to Tunis. So I went and I instantly fell in love with the people, the culture, the landscape, and I said to myself, I'm going to do a PhD in ethno, and this is going to be my region. And here I am, so I finished my degree a couple of years ago, and here I am being able to talk to you about it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I do in general in Tunisia, maybe about 10 minutes, and then the bulk of my paper is about my most recent project looking at the image and music associated with Che Guevara in Tunisia. If I have time, I have a little postlude. I was in Tunisia the middle of March for a couple weeks, and I do have a little update. If there's time, I'll provide an update. If not, for a future paper at some point. So as going back to my paper, as most of you know, I've been doing research in Tunisia for many years, but this is the first opportunity I've had to talk about my work within the context of a NEMLA or an MLA meeting. The focus of this presentation is a specific aspect of my research, namely the image of Che Guevara within the Tunisian musical landscape. However, I'd like to take just a few minutes to give you a general overview of my research as a whole, as a way of setting the stage. Fundamentally, I'm interested in the social function of music festivals in public music making in Tunisia. So there's going to be no harmonic analysis, there's going to be no phrase structures, really it's about the social context. Festivals are an important part of Tunisian public life. Most towns, no matter how small, manage to have an annual festival, and in the capital, Tunis, there is at least one festival a month, featuring music, theater, poetry, film, comedy, or dance. Not only are they an important feature of social life, but festival performances also serve as opportunities for Tunisians to articulate their national, political, ethnic, and religious identities. The focus of my research has been the International Festival of the Sahara, also known as the Dues Festival. It is the only Tunisian festival that simultaneously celebrates the culture of a town, its environs, its early inhabitants, namely the semi-nomadic Marazig. And the name Marazig actually comes from their great-great-great-grandfather, Sidi Marzouk. So anyone who believes that they are a descendant of Sidi Marzouk consider themselves to be Marazig or Marzouki. So no one can actually do the actual genealogy. No one can actually say definitively, I'm a descendant of Sidi Marzouk, but it's just assumed that if you are of sort of Arab Berber descent, you live in Dues, you call yourself Marazig or Marzouki. So the festival, the Dues Festival that I do work on, it takes place over 4 consecutive days in late December in Dues. It's a small town in southern Tunisia on the northern edge of the Sahara Desert. Founded in 1913 as the Day of the Camel, while Tunisia was still a French colony, the Douz Festival is the oldest of the country's 311 festivals. The early festivals, held before the start of World War I, were intended to bring together camel enthusiasts from among the French officers, residents of Douz, and the nomadic groups from the region. They were one-day events featuring camel races and competitions. Despite the fact that no festivals were held for the decades during, between, and after the World Wars, the residents consider the early festival to be the same event as the current one. The festival resumed in 1967 with a multi-day format that resembles the current event. Beginning in 1981, per the directive of President Bourguiba, the festival adopted an international dimension by inviting participants from other Arab and African countries. So the current festival is late December. Originally, there was this idea that it was going to correspond with the date harvest. Dates are very, it's the main source of income agriculturally in southern Tunisia. But the dates are harvested in November, and they realized if you're going to get tourists from Western Europe, you need to have the festival around Christmas time. So there's no longer a connection between the date harvest and the festival as there originally was. So the most important function of the festival appears to be its ability to serve as a forum for the residents of Douz to negotiate and process their identity as Marazik, or being of Douz. The festival is a public ritual that reflects the symbols, beliefs, and values of the citizens of Douz. Through a variety of performances, it provides an opportunity for the residents to reassess their collective identity and conflicting ideas about what it means to be of Douz. The demonstration of traditional hunting techniques reflects the Bedouin-like customs of the Marazik in the early 20th century. Brass band performances evoke images of the early 20th century colonial Tunisia. Folk dances depicting mystical practices and sub-Saharan traditions depict other aspects of the identity. And lastly, the instant availability of festival DVDs reminds visitors that they're part of the modern world. It is these wide-ranging and sometimes conflicting representations of Douz that reflect the primary tensions that are negotiated annually through festival performances. So I would like to show you a short video of the Douz Festival, just so you get a sense of what it's like. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that this really works. If not, Carrie is here to jump in. Okay, and easy. And let me get this playing first. So this is a scene from the Douz Festival. This is 2009. It's sort of a little bit hard to hear because you have about 10 groups playing simultaneously. Okay, so that's a little bit of the flavor of the festival, and this has really sort of been the core of my work over the last 10 years, is looking at this festival. Sadly, there are very few tourists who make it to Douz. I've been going regularly, and I see the same people year after year. There are a couple of problems. That there's no easy way of getting there. That the best you can do is, actually, I have a map I should, if I can negotiate technology here. Yeah. And Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Did it work? No.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so just for orientation, Tunisia is very, very up at the top, just over the border from Italy, and there you can see dues. So one of the challenges is getting there. The closest airport is in Tozer, off near the Algerian border. So the best you can do is fly from the capital Tunis to Tozer, and then take 2 shared vans from Tozer to Kabylie, and then Kabylie to Dues. So there's no closer airport, there's no train, there's no bus system. So tourists don't really make it there very easily. There are some groups from Italy that come and from Spanish groups that come, but they have sort of vaporized because of the threat of tourism. Because it is so close to both the Libyan and Algerian borders that most people have been scared away. So really the festival is for a few odd people like me who go down there and for the local Tunisians. So it's sort of an interesting manifestation of the festival that really is sort of an internal festival to sort of negotiate who these people are for themselves and not really for generating income or putting on a show for other people. So, but that's just sort of setting the context for the most of what I do. What I like to move on is talk about Che Guevara. So over the past 10 years, I've spent considerable time in the capital, Tunis, both before and after my trips to Dues. In Tunis, the musical landscape is very different. It is one that includes traditional and popular Tunisian genres, along with the popular music of North America and Western Europe. I've been fortunate enough to meet many musicians in Tunis, and during a visit in 2009, a friend introduced me to singer-songwriter Yasser Jaradi. No. There's Yasser Jaradi. Since then, I've been privileged to spend many hours with him in his studio in the old quarter of Tunis, and in his home in the northern suburb of La Goulette. I've also had the opportunity to see him perform dozens of times in a wide variety of settings. In this paper, I examine Jaradi's music and how it is understood as a form of social protest by a particular group of listeners in Tunis. In particular, I will focus on Jaradi's performance of Carlos Puebla 1965's classic Hasta, Siempre, Comandante. Now, you're probably saying, this is Spanish. Why is a song about Che Guevara becoming popular in Tunis? And this is the bulk of my paper. Although the song was originally intended as a tribute to Che Guevara, I suggest that its performance by Jaradi has taken on a new meaning, and that it is understood as a rallying cry of affluent, politically engaged liberal Tunisians. Jaradi and his songs are associated with the expression of a progressive, pro-democracy, anti-corruption ideology held by wealthy and well-educated Tunisians. Although images of and references to Guevara can be found throughout Tunisia, most Tunisians are unaware of the details of his biography and legacy. This phenomena of using Guevara's imagery without fully understanding its origin is not specific to Tunisia and is exhibited throughout the world. Alvaro Vargas Llosa has suggested that beyond Guevara's political beliefs and activities, quote, people have recently brandished or invoked Guevara's likeness as a beacon of justice and rebellion against abuse of power, end quote. It appears that this is the case with Jaradi and his audiences in Tunis. Hasta Siempre has become an anthem for Tunisians who wish to publicly express their rejection of all things related to the former corrupt and repressive regimes and their desire for the establishment of a more transparent Western-style democracy. It is a protest song against the government and policies of pre-revolution Tunisia. Ironically, most Tunisians do not know that Che Guevara was a staunch opponent of Western capitalist society. So in order to better understand the use of the image of Che Guevara in Tunisia, I begin with a description of a performance from the summer of 2013 that introduced me to the significance of the image of Che Guevara there. Just 5 miles north of Tunis, in the affluent northern suburb of Gamarth, is Espace Art Sadiqa, a newly renovated art gallery and performance space. On the evening of June 8th, 2013, marked the opening of a festival called The Lights of Tunisia. Jaradi encouraged me to attend, stating that many influential artists, writers, and musicians would be there. I was introduced to many of the artists whose works were installed in the gallery and was encouraged by Jaradi and the gallery's director, Stroll and Engel. After an hour, the director guided people to the rooftop terrace for the evening's concert, drinks, and dessert. There were performances by well-known poets and singers from throughout Tunisia. Girardi was the featured performer. I have seen Yasser perform numerous times and can always identify 3 songs that are staples of his performances. So a song called Dima Dima, which means always, always, which is a tribute to the Tunisian people. Nisma Virani, which is a tribute to a good friend of his, Chokri Belid, who is a leftist political figure who got assassinated. And this song, Hasta, Siempre, Comandante. So the crowd at this event demanded that Girardi sing Hasta Siempre, and they demand this at every concert I've ever attended. So this one, and they sing along in Spanish, despite the fact that most Tunisians don't speak Spanish and they don't understand Spanish. So not only is this song popular with Girardi's listener, the image of Che Guevara is found throughout Tunisia. And I have a picture at the end of my PowerPoints where I show a picture of Che on the side of someone's Toyota pickup truck. So you can find pictures of Che Guevara on t-shirts, on sides of buildings, on ashtrays. It's really popular to walk through the Central Market and get a Che Guevara ashtray. Everyone just loves the image of Che Guevara, even though they really don't know who Che Guevara is. They think it's just a really cool image. So there are also books about Guevara in the Tunis bookstore. And if there's time at the end of this, I'll briefly discuss about in 2016, sort of slightly changing or evolving attitudes about, or reinterpretations of Che Guevara. So first I want to provide just a little background on Che Guevara and this song. So Ernesto Guevara de la Serna was born June 14, 1928 in Rosario, Argentina, to a family with leftist leanings. In his early 20s, he traveled extensively through South and Central America and was profoundly affected by the poverty and social inequalities that he witnessed. He blamed much of the ills of society on capitalism, imperialism, neocolonialism, and US foreign policy. In the midst of his travels, he graduated from medical school in 1953. The next year, he visited Mexico City, where he met Cuban brothers Fidel and Raul Castro, political exiles who were planning to overthrow the Cuban dictator Batista. The Castros recruited help in Mexico, and Guevara was one of their most trusted aides. After they entered Havana in 1959 and established a Marxist government, Guevara became a Cuban citizen and a prominent figure in the Cuban government. By 1965, Guevara had dropped out of public life and went to the Democratic Republic of Congo in order to participate in that country's civil war. The next year, he went to Bolivia to order and organize a guerrilla force with the hopes of organizing a revolution there. And on October 8, 1967, with the help from a CIA informant who had been tracking him, Bolivian special forces overtook his group and Guevara was captured. He was killed the next day. According to Fernando Rios, after his death, quote, Guevara became an anti-establishment martyr figure for young people throughout the world, end quote. As previously discussed, I argue that this is similar to how he was understood in Tunisia. The image of Guevara is used to represent a rejection of the regimes that have been in place since the 1950s. In Tunisia, however, it is not just young people who invoke the image. People of all ages are attracted to the Guevara mystique. We will see this in the popularity of Hasta Siempre. So a bit about the song. Hasta Siempre is a tribute to Guevara written by the Cuban singer, guitarist, and composer Carlos Puebla in 1965. It was intended as a reply to Che Guevara's farewell letter to Fidel Castro and the Cuban people when Guevara left Cuba. Puebla composed the song after Castro publicly released the letter. So here's the opening of the original version performed by Puebla. And hopefully I can get this to work. And yeah. And so here is the original 1965 version. Oops, I forgot my handout. Some lyrics.
Desde la histórica altura, donde el sol de tu bravura le puso cerco a la muerte. A mí se queda muy claro.
de transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara.
So we will hear more of this again. So the song exists in many versions, including the Cuban Revolutionary original, this one, as well as rock, Latino pop, jazz, salsa, bolero, reggae, and hip-hop adaptations. Not only has the song been popular in Cuba since 1965, it has taken on meaning elsewhere. According to Fernando Rios, Hasta Siempre was an essential anti-establishment number in France in the late 1960s. In order to establish why Hasta Siempre and the image of Che Guevara resonate so strongly in Tunisia, it is necessary to explore what has been the establishment in Tunisia. So my informants have stated that Tunisia has always maintained a dialogue with both the Arab world and the West. They explained that the Roman, Phoenician, Ottoman, Spanish, and French settlements in or occupation of Tunisia has deeply influenced how citizens understand themselves in their relationship to the world. As Lisa Anderson suggests, Tunisia's connection to these outside settlers is directly related to its national identity. She asserts that fundamentally the Tunisian people understand themselves as Arabo-Islamic. Arabic is unequivocally the national language and Islam is the dominant religion, even if it is liberally interpreted. However, both Presidents Habib Bourguiba, who is in power from 53 to 87, and then Ben Ali, who is from 87 to 2011, they both had spent time in France and had strong affinities to the West. They both wanted Tunisia to be closely allied with the West, especially France, and many social, economic, and educational policies were based on Western models. I argue that their administrations are responsible for the pervasive, progressive, pro-Western sentiment that can still be witnessed throughout the country today. Because of these administrations, Tunisians had favorable opinions of the West and their Arab neighbors. However, they ultimately grew bitterly dissatisfied with the rampant corruption in the Bourguiba and Ben Ali regimes. I will discuss this further on. Since the 2011 revolution, some Tunisians have expressed a desire for a government based on Sharia law, so this is law based on the Quran, and a return to a more conservative practice of Islam in the country. However, this is not the position of the majority of the population, as demonstrated by the fact that the political party aligned with conservative Islam has not won recent elections. Also, since the revolution and the introduction of freedom of speech in Tunisia, increasing numbers of musicians and artists have used music and art to express religious and political messages. A whole genre of Tunisian songs called chansons engagées, so politically engaged songs. Songs about social and political issues have developed since 2011. So my friend Yasser Jaradi is undoubtedly the most visible and successful of these singers of chansons engagées. So a little bit more about Yasser, and move it back to Yasser. There we go. So Yasser Jaradi was born in 1970 in Gabes, an industrial seaside city in central Tunisia. He earned a master's degree in sculpture from the University of Tunis in 1998 and received attention and awards for his calligraphy in years following his graduation. His work has featured at exhibits in galleries in Tunisia, the US, South Korea, France, Switzerland, Spain, Egypt, and Algeria. And again, if technology works, I can show you some of his installations. Again, he's an award-winning calligrapher. This was his installation in South Korea about 10 years ago, and this is a piece that he created on a discarded door a couple years ago. This is actually a wedding present for a friend of his. So Yasser explained that although he started playing guitar and singing while at the university, he felt the need to express himself in the years before the 2011 revolution. He stated that the final years of Ben Ali's tenure were extremely repressive, especially for artists and musicians. Many artists and musicians were thrown in jail for singing songs that were anti-government. There was a riot because someone had painted a large religious and political painting and using little ants as the sort of background of it, and the government said, no, this is not right, and they'd throw the artist in jail. Jaradi explained that the government censored artists' works and police often incarcerated them for creating art and music that criticized Ben Ali's administration and the state of the country. During the revolution, Yasser wrote the song Dima Dima, a song acknowledging the struggles of the Tunisian people and their love for the country. Dima Dima became an anthem for post-Ben Ali Tunisia in the months immediately following the revolution. It was sung throughout Egypt as well during the revolution there. Although Girardi has been writing politically engaged songs before the revolution, his career as a musician was launched with the popularity of the song Dima Dima. Along with Hasta, Siempre, it is a staple of every performance by Girardi. His songs, including Dima Dima, sound remarkably similar to Western pop folk genre, popularized by artists such as Bob Dylan, Neil Young, and Joni Mitchell. Indeed, Girardi relayed that during his years at university, he listened extensively to Dylan, Young, Mitchell, as well as Woody Guthrie. Although Girardi is familiar with classical and popular Arabic music and traditional Tunisian genres, he stated that he feels the Western singer-songwriter idiom is the most appropriate one for the messages in his songs. Girardi added that this style is popular amongst young and middle-aged Tunisians. They understand that Western folk songs are often associated with political movements and social change. In recent years, his set list includes a folk-inspired rendition of Hasta Siempre. I asked Yasser why Hasta Siempre is so popular and why it is consistently on his set list. He explained that Guevara has long been understood as an agent of change for the people. Girardi added that he's seen as representation of the idea that the people can have a voice, protest unjust government, and rise up against injustice. I asked if Tunisians know Guevara's full story, and Yasser replied, no, and they aren't interested. All they want to know about is the image, this idea that there's the power of the people that can transcend all, and that evil governments can be overthrown. Many Tunisians have mixed feelings about the regimes of President Bourguiba and Ben Ali. On one hand, their economic policy supported a stable economic base for decades, while social policies allowed for women's rights and effective education and healthcare systems. On the other hand, the government was rife with corruption and cronyism, and citizens, especially artists and journalists, were jailed for criticizing the government and its policies. Although Tunisia has technically been a democracy since Bourguiba's presidency, up until recently, most Tunisians knew they had no voice because it was commonly believed that the elections were fixed in order to secure re-election for all incumbents. So the last election of Ben Ali, so that would have been in 1990. Supposedly 99% of the ballots came back in favor of Ben Ali, even though there are other candidates out there. So everyone knew it was fixed. So since the 2011 revolution, the protection of free speech has allowed musicians to perform politically charged music in public. Although Tunisians of all ages and backgrounds appreciate Girardi's music, there is a tendency for well-educated, progressively minded, left-leaning, pro-Western Tunisians to gravitate to his concerts, visit his workshops, and learn all of his songs. These individuals have the education, background, and exposure to Western media to understand that not only does Girardi intend for his music to be the voice of the people, but that the Western pop folk genre that he uses has meaning. These Tunisians understand that Bob Dylan, Woody Guthrie, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell were part of a larger social movement to mobilize others to think about the current state of affairs in the world and to act against social injustices. Despite what Guevara truly represents for Girardi's listeners, namely justice and ability to fight against the abuse of power, Hasta Siempre encapsulates a vision of a new Tunisia that is truly democratic and free from corruption, a country liberated from the shackles of repression. And in recent years, Girardi has featured Hasta Siempre at events honoring the late Tunisian left secular opposition leader, Chokri Bel-Eid. Bel-Eid was a neighbor and good friend of Girardi who was assassinated outside of his home in 2013. Many Tunisians believe that he was killed by politicians in the interim government, Ben Ali's supporters, or members of the Islamist Party. There have been countless tributes to Bel-Eid since his death. His assassination is seen as a symbol of the corruption and intolerance that exists in the Tunisian political system. Since his death, Bel-Eid has been memorialized as a hero and a spokesman for the people. There's strong comparisons to and associating him with Che Guevara. So I have another video, I hope, showing Yesser singing at a Shokri Bel Eid benefit concert. And there we go. So here is Yesser singing, and there's a photo of Shokri Bel Eid in the lower right-hand corner. So one more video clip. So Yesser has a band that he named after his song Dima Dima. So the band is Dima Dima, and he has envisioned this as sort of a world music ensemble playing Tunisian music. So here is his band Dima Dima playing Hasta, Siempre as well. So he has a flute player who not only plays the Tunisian gaspaya, but also plays shakuhachi and recorder and modern flute. Yesser is also known to break out his ukulele as well. So as I've mentioned in this paper, most Tunisians are not familiar with the details of Che Guevara's life and legacy. They are attracted to the image of a rebel who could lead others to fix the ills of society. He has come to represent the idea that the power of the people has the capacity to overthrow an oppressive government. Just as Guevara is remembered as a hero for the revolution in Cuba, it was the people of Tunisia who see themselves as heroes for inciting a revolution and forcing Ben Ali's departure from power. Hasta Siempre has become an anthem for informed Tunisians who wish to publicly express their rejection of all things related to the corrupt and repressive regimes. So Girardi's Western folk-inspired version of Hasta Siempre resonates with well-educated and well-informed Tunisians who understand that Western folk music has long been associated with protest and social change. For them, it is not only the song and its imagery that is meaningful, it is the performer and the performance as well. So just to give you a little update of what I discovered in going back in March, this past March. So I was down in Duz, I was in Tunis, I traveled around, and I would have my picture of Che Guevara, I would have these videos around, and I would show people to tell me what you think. You know, who is this person? Tell me about the song. And you know, most people could say, yes, you know, I don't know who this is, but I know he's a famous leader, and this is really he's about revolution. He's about, you know, the power of the people. The other follow-up question I would ask people is, to what degree is Che Guevara taught in history classes in school? And most people who are 21 older would say, never, you know, never taught in schools. However, one of my good friends, Marzouk, has a teenage daughter. And I said, Suhair, do you know who this is? And she said, of course, we learn about him in school now. So it's interesting that Che Guevara is now part of the standardized secondary school curriculum in world history classes. That his role in the Cuban Revolution is now part of the curriculum, and he is taught as being a revolutionary. And beyond that, she can tell me very much, and she reminded me, Alan, you know I hate school, I don't remember anything. You know, ironically, her French teacher in Duz is a very, very famous singer-songwriter in Tunisia, and she'll say, I hate French. You know, she said, you know, not only is he a terrible teacher, but I hate his music too. So, you know, it is interesting that now in the current generation of youth in Tunisia, this is part of the curriculum. There's another student I talked to who's a 28-year-old master's student who's studying industrial design in Tunis. And he knows Yasser, he knows the song, he knows the research I've been doing on this song and the reception of the song. And he said, you know what, Alan, this song is just about hipness. And he used that term exactly. His English is not bad. And he said, you have to remember that, just like in America, there are hipsters. In Tunisia, there are hipsters too. And part of this is their anthem. That they don't really understand Che Guevara, they don't understand his history, they don't really understand what any of this means. But if you are a hipster, and if you want to be seen as part of the anti-establishment movement, you go to Yasser's concerts. You sing Hasta, Siempre, even though you have no idea what it means. He said, it's just a facade, it's just a movement. He said, Omar said, Alan, trust me, in 10 years, no one will know who Che Guevara is, no one will be singing the song, and Yasser will no longer be popular. So I thought that was very interesting, very interesting. But for the last 4 or 5 years, every time Yasser goes to a concert, everyone chants, Hasta, Hasta, and they force him to sing the song. And everyone sings, everyone knows the words, they don't know what it means, and no one speaks, Spanish is not a dominant language. So no one really understands what it means. But for them, it's very powerful as an image of we had oppressive regimes, we want to abandon that, and we want to move on. Even they look to American models. They just think American democracy is the ideal democracy. And I then remind them that Che Guevara was very much anti-imperialist, anti-American, and he felt that America was the root of all evils in the modern world. And people just shrug their shoulders. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to take questions about Dues or Yasser or Hasta Siempre or anything else.
Yeah.
Sure, John.
I was interested how that particular song is it mainly being disseminated and is it mainly live performance in Tunisia?
Mainly live
how much
performance.
recording are people doing or using internet? Is the internet really being used for that kind of dissemination?
So
generations or?
everyone loves YouTube
Yeah.
in Tunisia, and people go to it all the time. So it is really disseminated by live performance. There's a problem with the recording industry in Tunisia that although there is a copyright law, it is violated blatantly. And that artists do not want to record anything in Tunisia because within months copies will appear in supermarkets illegally being sold for about 75 cents. And so don't tell anyone. But so one of my friends said, Alan, if you need a copy of the latest version of Office, we can go down to the market and buy a copy for $1. So we go down to the market and we buy a copy of Adobe Suite for about $2. You can buy Microsoft Office for about $1. Finale or Sibelius you can buy for about $3. And truly there are copyright laws in place, but there's no enforcement. So people are not encouraged really to record, and people don't buy recordings. So really, it's live performance. Yeah. Sure, Janet.
I'm wondering, Alan, if you're aware of whether this anthem is used in other countries in North Africa, associated with the Arab Spring.
Not that I know of, and I have asked, and people who sort of travel around do not know of its popularity in Morocco or Egypt. As I mentioned, Yasser's song Dima Dima is an anthem in Egypt, and people do know of Yasser in Egypt. I mean, he's a popular figure there. But Hasta Siempre, as far as I know, is truly just a Tunisian phenomenon. Yeah, Alex.
And I was wondering how isolated is this within Tunisia? I mean, there must be other pop singers besides Yasser, and do they also do songs about Che Guevara, or are there other revolutionary figures that they're treated the same way?
They don't, and this is almost a trademark of what Yasser does. And when I saw him in March, I asked him, I said, tell me about Hasta, your performances of Hasta Siempre. And he said, Alan, you'd be excited to know I've started singing a new song. There's actually, and I haven't put all the pieces together yet, and I'm not quite sure he has it right. So there's another Carlos Pueblo song about Augusto Pinochet. And Latin America is not my thing, so if anyone does work in Latin America, so there's a song called Todos Unidos also by Puebla that is supposedly about Augusto Pinochet. And Girardi has said that he started singing it, again with the same message. Again, I don't know if this is right. I don't know. I do know that that Puebla did write Todos Unidos, but I don't know if it was really about Pinochet. I have no evidence to suspect that it is about Pinochet. But he says, yes, Alan, it is about Pinochet, and it's the same message. And he said Tunisians feel the same way about Pinochet as they do about Che Guevara. And I don't think so. But I'm not really in a position, to say, yes, sir, you're wrong. So I just sort of nod my head and thank you very much. And, I just jot it down and pass along the information. But it is also interesting that there are university groupies that follow Yes Sir around, that there are lots of sort of people in 18, 19, 20 who very much follow the American singer-songwriter model. And there are lots of people, there are other Tunisian singer-songwriters who are emulating styles. There's one young woman who sang just like Ani DeFranco, and obviously had been listening to lots of Ani DeFranco recordings. So the power behind the American singer-songwriter movement, especially the early years and the real politically charged stuff, Tunisians understand that there is a meaning behind that. If they fully grasp it, probably not. But they say, you know what? If Americans see that there's power behind it, maybe we can imbue power into it as well. Zoe.
The first video you showed,
Yeah.
it's like all men, right? Except for one woman kind of dancing, or I don't know.
Oh, the festival video.
Yeah.
Yeah, so down in Duz is a very traditional place, and there are very few women performers. That women will perform at home. They'll perform at marriages, because it's a small community. But for public performance, you will very, very rarely down south see a woman take the stage. That is radically different up north in Tunis. And actually in Tunis, there's actually an all-women Arab orchestra. That is very, very famous. And Alison Jones at the University of Michigan did her doctoral dissertation on this all-women orchestra of Tunis. So they're very famous. Up north it's a completely different story, but down south is very, very traditional and radically different. Yeah. I wanted to do some field recordings of women down south, and some family, they agreed to do it, but they completely covered up. So, not only did they have normally they don't wear burqas, but, they threw on a burqa and then they put another scarf over themselves. I could barely hear them. And it was very dim lighting. But they said, we don't want to, and they said, don't show this to anyone. They didn't want, but they also realized that I wanted to preserve this, and I needed this. But radically different. So yeah, down in Duz, you'll very, very rarely see at the festival or elsewhere a woman perform. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, I'm Joanna from Grande. This is my first meeting.
Yay!
So I'm kind of curious, you're talking about this tiny town, Algiers.
Yeah.
And I noticed on the map that it's very close to the Ours region of Algeria.
Yeah.
Now, is that considered more of a Berber region? In Tunisia?
It is considered a Berber
My
region.
shows are on the
Yeah.
Algerian side.
Yep. So the Maraziq people really, they consider themselves to be a Berber people. And they will talk about how the Arabs invaded them. And still, there are lots and lots of legends of the Arab invasions and how the Berbers and the Arabs fought, and the Berbers won and they drove out the Arabs, even though the Arabs did settle the area and everyone speaks Arabic. But even to this day, that there the ongoing tales about the fact that fundamentally they are a Berber people. And it's interesting that going back to the map, that the people of Duz are actually very closely aligned with actually Libyans. That linguistically they feel that their language is closer to Libyan Arabic than actually the Arabic spoken in Tunis. And it's a very, very different dialect. And the music, that you hear in Duz, the traditional music, is they love Libyan music. And they love, there's a specific rhythmic pattern, Fizani rhythm. I can't do Fizani for you, but very specific rhythmic pattern. They love Fizani, they love Libyan music. And some people can actually trace the Marzuki tribe coming from eastern Saudi Arabia through Egypt, through Libya, into southern Tunisia. So, and even though this is, almost 1,000 years ago, it's really, it's on their mind, the fact that they have this connection to Libya. And yeah, so that is a good point. There is a strong Berber connection. Is it time?
It's time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.